The first question goes to Mr. Dahlberg, as previously arranged. Okay, what makes you feel that you could be a great state senator for this district?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for having us in this morning. I think I have the right combination of personal and professional experience. Personally, I grew up in a blue-collar household. I learned early on the values of hard work, personal responsibility, value of the dollar, and integrity. Professionally, my background is in healthcare policy. I've worked in that field in the public and private sectors for my entire professional career. And I'm presently a selectman in the town of Chelmsford. Chelmsford's a big town, 34,000 residents, almost a quarter of the Senate district. So I've gotten a good-sized taste of public office, the responsibilities and the obligations that come with it. To me, the most important part of public service, I say this all the time, is being responsive to the people you represent. When a taxpayer calls you or emails you with a question or a concern, you get back to them. That's the great lesson I've learned as a selectman in Chelmsford. That's the same approach I bring to the state senate. The great frustration I hear with the current taxpayers, from the taxpayers of the district on our current state senate, is that she doesn't get back to people. And that's something I would do dramatically differently when elected.
Okay. So what gives you the credentials to become state senator?
I've grown up in the district. I love the people of the district. I was born in Waltham, raised in Chelmsford, also grew up in a blue-collar home, and come from a military family background. My dad was in the Korean conflict. He lost his life, leaving my mother a widow at the age of 24. I have two sons currently serving in the Marines and a daughter who served in the Air Force for 8 years. I believe that my background, which has always been in the private sector, working everything from scooping ice cream to a very high consulting position with IBM. I understand businesses. I've had my own IT consulting company for 13 years, and so I understand the problems that business owners face when they're talking about regulations and all of the other things that go on being a small business owner. I believe that I can represent the business owners better because I understand their concerns. One of the things I want to do immediately is provide for transparency, put the checkbook online so small business owners can compete with those that are being currently employed by the State House. For instance, let's say you are a landscape person and you would like to find out how much does the State House pay for having its lawns mowed. If the checkbook were online, you'd be able to see that immediately, put in a bid, and perhaps win that bid. And that applies across the board. The other thing I believe...
We're going to get into some of the business issues. Eric, 30 seconds. Anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I'm not going to take issue with my opponent's assessment of her qualifications to run. I mean, all I'd add is that, I have the public office experience. I know the challenges and I know the challenges that are involved. I've been in the trenches for the past 3 years, and I'd be prepared to take the work ethic I've acquired in Chelmsford to the state senate on behalf of the people of the district.
This has been a real interesting year because more candidates have come out on both sides of the political aisle than in the past. It's almost been 2 decades since we've seen so many Democrats challenge incumbents or open seats, and also Republicans take an active engagement on a local level. With that in mind, what is the major distinction? The one major distinction between you, Sandy, and your rival in this primary?
I think the major distinction is the fact that I've worked in the private sector all my life. My opponent pretty much worked in the public sector up until about less than a year ago. I believe in March of this year he left to start a consulting company. My background as a private sector person gives me an understanding of the business climate, the business owners. I worked for IBM for several years and met lots of customers all over New England because they would consult me out. And so you get a broad view of some of the things that are concerning them. The biggest thing is regulations and taxes, and now, from what I'm hearing, talking to the business owners, it's the healthcare, the mandatory healthcare that they have to pay, and it's crippling them. And the sales tax increase is also crippling them. And having been a small business owner myself for 13 years, I can understand that and identify with that.
Okay, so private sector experience is the major difference.
I think so.
Okay, Eric, what is the biggest difference, do you think, between you and your...
I mean, we certainly do have different experiences. I don't think that's necessarily a plus or a minus for either of us. I mean, I certainly don't have as lengthy a career in the private sector as my opponent. You know, I haven't been planning my whole life, and I'm not insinuating you have. I haven't been planning, you know, what experiences could I best use to run for public office. I pursued my passion. My passion is healthcare policy. It's what I went to school for. I'll be paying back my student loans till I'm a proud senior citizen. And after I got out of school, I wanted to, frankly, get my money's worth, my education. So I went into the public sector. I worked at the federal level and the state level. And recently I went into the private sector. That's where I intend to spend the rest of my professional career, you know, after public service. So it's been that combination of experiences that I think has prepared me for public service. In terms of what's different between us, I mean, we bring different priorities to the table, and I won't pretend to speak for Sandy in terms of what her priorities are. Mine, I've been very clear about what my priorities are. Lower taxes, streamline government, improve the business climate, and get back to people when they reach out to their state senator. Those are the same priorities I brought to the table as a selectman in Chelmsford. Same deal in the state senate.
Sandy, 30 seconds to respond.
There's something I want to say, and I'm not quite sure how to frame it. Eric has had 2 votes in Chelmsford recently, or 2 decisions he had to make. In one case, he recused himself and didn't take a vote, and in the other case, he voted against a small business. I don't see how that serves the people. I know that the people I've talked to are furious with both of those decisions. Why didn't you exercise the same decision-making in both cases? Because it was evidently that Mr. Iliopoulos, who was involved in the North Road development, had held a fundraiser for you, so you recused yourself. But in the case of Mr. Harrington, who also gave to both of us, you did not recuse yourself. I don't understand that.
Okay, well, you've opened the door on that. Eric, do you want to explain that, or do you want to respond to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to you on that. Should I?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think she's talking about the land deal and also the meat house vote. Is that okay? Well,
Yeah,
voters out there, you might as well.
Yeah, the land deal, of course, very contentious issue in Chelmsford. Folks have been talking about it for a while. I'm sure they'll still be talking about it for some time. I made a decision to recuse myself from any board deliberations or votes on that matter because one of the parties involved had thrown a political fundraiser for me. I decided to recuse myself after consulting numerous times with the State Ethics Commission, and they advised me that that was the best course to take. When it became clear that that issue was going to come before the Board of Selectmen, I called the State Ethics Commission back and said, I don't want to be MIA on this. How about I just give the money back? Can we consider that sort of clearing the slate so then I can participate? And they said, absolutely not. Even if you gave the money back, you'd still open up yourself, the board, the whole process to accusations of a conflict of interest. So I made the decision to recuse myself and to maintain my recusal. I knew it wouldn't be popular, but I don't make my decisions in Chelmsford based on what's going to score me the most points on the blogs or anything like that. I do based on what I honestly think is right. I was prepared for the criticism that comes with the job. I stand by my decision. Likewise on the meat house, this was a very contentious issue in Chelmsford. This was a new butcher shop that moved to town. Phenomenal business. My wife and I go there all the time. They wanted to be able to sell beer and wine in addition to meat. In my preparations on this issue, I heard from a large number of residents, the overwhelming majority of which didn't want to see this license granted. Now, I didn't base my decision on, I didn't sort of take a poll of the citizens, but the rationale they gave for opposing this was quite compelling. Chelmsford has a very long precedent of denying licenses like this, and I consider myself conservative in following the traditions of the town, the policies that the Board of Selectmen uses. So that's what I was swayed by. Now that business ultimately appealed our denial to the state, and the state is going to either uphold our decision or turn it back to the Board of Selectmen. If they do, we'll have another deliberation on this matter, and we'll see what happens.
Did you go to the State Ethics Board, though, to recuse yourself from that vote?
No, there was no issue at all about recusing myself on that vote. People have contributed to my campaign. All sorts of people have contributed to my campaign. There was no attempt at bribe or attempt to sort of swing me in any direction.
30 seconds, and then I want to move on to more.
More mundane things?
Yeah. No, some other good issues, but 30 seconds.
My only comment is both Mr. Harrington, who is a friend of mine and a contributor of mine as well, has contributed to Eric's campaign and to my campaign. And the feeling is that in that case, because Mr. Harrington opposes granting beer and wine licenses to convenience stores, which I support, and to gas stations, which I support, I would have personally gone to Mr. Harrington myself and told him how I was going to vote, and I would be voting for the Meat House. I believe that it's an upscale place. All he wanted to sell was actually wine, and I just don't understand why in one case he recused himself, you recused yourself because of a fundraiser, but in another case, for somebody who was very, very interested, who had contributed, you did not. Had you recused yourself, it would have been 2-2. And people have asked me that, and they've asked me to ask Eric, and this is the first time I've really brought it up. I didn't know we were going to be really doing debate for me.
Okay, 30 seconds, do you want to rebut that?
Yeah, I mean, I did talk to Mr. Harrington before the vote. He expressed what he'd like to see happen. I thanked him for his input. Like I said, I heard from a lot of different residents, some who contributed to my campaign, some who have not. I weighed the evidence in front of me. There was absolutely no arm twisting of any kind. I mean, I had a number of people who wanted very strongly to see the license approved contributed to my campaign. So if anything, I went against some of my political contributors. Contributions play absolutely no role in my decision making. The one case where I feared there would be a perception of such was the 9 North Road matter, because the party involved had actually thrown a fundraiser for me. It wasn't just a contribution, it was an event. I mean, it was a bigger deal in my view, and in the view of the State Ethics Commission. So I recused myself. I mean, I stand by that. I think that's what you're supposed to do when you want to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And again, I knew I'd be criticized. I knew people would say, where's Eric, and so forth, and I stand by it.
Well, I mean, it is an interesting issue. I don't want to belabor it. I mean, the thing comes down to in this market where we do have a high unemployment rate, even though this district is one of the most affluent, but there's still the unemployment rate is almost near 7.6% if you look at all the communities in this district. So you're trying job creation. I would imagine if the Meat House got that license, they might have created more jobs and stuff. And I know both of you people are in favor of job creation, but does and this is your question, we're back to you. I mean, what is your basic job stimulus plan for not only the district, for this state? And does your decision on that Meat House vote, it could be construed as being anti-business, yet at the same time you were concerned about public safety too, I imagine, right? That's right. So there are contracting factors in there, and how do you weigh one against the other? But the question is, we go back, and maybe you can, it is a convoluted question, but your job stimulus plan, and how does it play in on the local level?
Yeah. First, on the Meat House, just not to belabor that point, but at the first session, at the first session of our public hearing on the Meat House, I asked the applicant very directly, would you still open in Chelmsford even if you did not get this license? And he said emphatically yes. He did not insinuate that it would lead to job cuts or anything like that. He was still going to open, and he's been, and unintentionally, thanks to all this PI, he's doing a great job in Chelmsford. My wife and myself, like I said, patronize that business quite frequently. So I have no concerns about job cuts or anything like that with the license because of what he said. In terms of a broader job creation plan, I mean, clearly the thing that we can do, the most straightforward step we can take, is to lower taxes. I mean, time and time again, it's been shown at the local, state, and federal levels that when you cut taxes, you jumpstart the economy because you're injecting in the state's case, hundreds of millions to billions of dollars back into the private sector that consumers can use to buy things, and that consumer activity generates growth, and businesses expand and bring people on staff and make capital investments and so forth. So first and foremost, tax cuts. Let's get the sales tax rate back down. Let's get the income tax rate back down. In tandem with those tax cuts, of course, we have to make expenditure cuts on the expenditure side of the budget. Unlike the federal government, the state can't run a deficit. Thank God it can't, because God only knows where we'd be in Massachusetts if they had the ability to do that. We have to make a number of significant spending cuts to balance the budget if we're going to make those tax cuts. And there are huge opportunities for savings on the spending side. Healthcare, largest single item in the state's budget, hundreds of millions of dollars in efficiencies that can be achieved in the state's Medicaid program alone. Freezing hiring and wages at the state level would save conservatively $140 million a year. That would pay for the tax cuts. Finally, freezing regulatory changes. I've been out there and talked to businesses, and I hear it time and again. Yes, taxes are way too high. Yes, the state is wasting way too much money. But the thing that irks me the most is that the state is constantly changing the rules of the game. File this form online, then it's signed hard copy, quarterly, then annually. The penalty is this, then it's that. It usually goes up. Let's freeze all regulations that touch businesses for 3 years. And in that 3-year moratorium, let's peel the onion and straighten this mess out, figure it out so that it works for businesses. When we restart the clock, set it so that changes only take effect on one date certain every year, like an annual renewal date, kind of akin to what we do in health insurance, so that it's more predictable and dependable. Businesses know what the state is going to do to them because it happens on one day a year.
That's interesting. Because this is a question about your own personal job stimulation plan, you can certainly, a stimulus plan, maybe you can give your own plan, and then if you have, I'll give you extra time if you wanted to make any distinctions between your opponent, but your own job stimulus plan, what do you think is essential to that?
What I've been saying to people across the district in articles that are written where we have to respond to questions, the number one thing I think is reducing the taxes. There's been onerous taxes that have been put on business over the last 2 years. $500 million in 2008 has crippled and killed many, many businesses. The health insurance costs, the mandated health insurance costs are hurting the small business owners more than most people could even imagine. I was talking to a small business owner the other day who said he had let 3 people go because he wanted to get his numbers down underneath the mandatory 10. And that, of course, hurts his bottom line because he can't do as much as he was doing before. So he's choosing between productivity and cost, and I think that's wrong. I think we should repeal the health care bill that's here in Massachusetts and fix health care the way that we should have to begin with. Tort reform, number one, easy to do. And secondly would be implementing a means to buy insurance across state lines. I think that would reduce costs tremendously, and then take a look at some of the other areas where it needs tweaking. But I think this monstrosity of healthcare that we have in Massachusetts is hurting everybody. It's hurting the elderly, it's hurting small businesses, and it's hurting large businesses. What they're doing is they're telling their employees, some of the smaller businesses are telling their employees, I'm taking your insurance away. Go get on Massachusetts healthcare. And that's not a solution because that adds more cost to we the people. And the other thing is transparency. I think putting the checkbook online, I think would do an awful lot to reduce costs at the State House and waste. And it would also stimulate the small business owner who could then see where the state is spending its money. Let's say you have a lawn service and you're interested in finding out, what does the state pay these people to come in and mow their lawns? Gee, I'm a small landscaper. I could probably bid on that, and they would be able to know what to bid because they'd see what they're currently paying. I think that would help small business owners across the state, and it would also keep the legislators in line. If they knew that people were watching where they're spending their money, they're going to be a little bit more cautious in the things that they choose to spend the money on. So I think those things would generate jobs, would help the small business owners to grow, and would help the big businesses stay in state instead of moving out of state or out of the country.
Both of you people raised a lot of points in both your plans, from taxes okay, to healthcare, and I think those are issues that we want to touch on. So let's just keep this going. Let's talk about the taxes. If you were elected a state senator and the initiative on the ballot to roll back the state sales tax to 3%, right, is approved. The Patrick administration is saying that it will cause major chaos, take about $5 billion out of the state government. Okay, how would you vote on? Well, first of all, would you go along with the will of the people to support that ballot initiative if you were elected state senator? And I guess that's just an easy yes or no answer, although nothing is really easy because there are a lot of complexities. So what would you do as a state senator if that comes up to a vote to abide by the will of the people if the rollback is approved and supported by the people?
Yes, I would support it. I mean, if the people spoke and they voted to roll back the sales tax, they've sent a very clear directive to Beacon Hill. Lower it to 3%. I mean,
right. Say the yes or no, because then I have a follow-up question. How do we do it?
I
yes
not only support it, I've endorsed it.
Okay. Now, we know $5 billion is a lot of money. And the first thing they'll raise is that all the social programs, because they usually go right to the heart first. They don't say government employees. They say social programs and all this other stuff. But being rational, $5 billion, the bottom's going to fall out somewhere. Okay. How do we do it? How do we make government smaller, yet responsive, and do the priority things that we have to do?
Well, that's why I've withheld personal support on this ballot question. Obviously, if I was elected and the people voted to roll it back, I would comply with the people's wishes. But people have asked personally, how do you stand on that? And I said, I honestly haven't heard a plan on how we're going to get there. You know, I'm all ears. I mean, I want taxes to go as low as they can go. But what's the plan? The people that push this initiative, I imagine they have some sense of where they'd like to cut. I haven't seen it yet. I'm not calling them out or anything like that. I just like to see the plan before I personally commit to it. That having been said, if it does pass and if we do lower the rate, we're going to have to find a significant amount of savings. I mean, I've identified savings consistent with my own plan to lower it from 625 to 5. Like I said, Medicaid, switching everybody on Medicaid, the state's mass health program, from a fee-for-service platform to a managed care platform. Technical distinction that would save the state conservatively $250 million a year and provide better health care to the folks on Medicaid, the largest single line item in the state's budget. Wage and hiring freeze, like I mentioned previously, conservatively $140 million a year. Repeal the Pacheco law, which prevents the state from outsourcing services that can be delivered much more efficiently in the private sector. Things like customer service, call centers, IT services, an ever-growing chunk of the state's delivery. Contract those out. Estimates vary on where we get the savings for that. Some people say 50, as high as $100 million a year. So those are the things I've identified right off the top to pay for the tax cuts I've called for. To go lower than that, like I said, we'd have to comply with the people's wishes, but I haven't seen a plan. So we'd have to come up with one mighty quick.
Okay. Sandy, where do you get that $5 billion so the bottom doesn't fall out? Although people think the sky's going to fall. Personally, I don't believe it will. But
that's what they always say. Carla Howell hasn't necessarily called out the specific things. On her website, she lists an awful lot of areas that we should be looking at. Her idea, her main focus is you've got to stop feeding the beast. The more we give government to spend, the more they're going to continue to spend. If you put a rope around it, if you stop the money from reaching them, then they're going to have to start looking for ways to cut. Now, there's a gentleman in another state, and I can't remember who he is off the top of my head. I'm a little fuzzy this morning. But he has proposed putting 10 cuts a week or 10 cuts a month up on the internet for the people to vote on. And so it becomes the citizens who say, okay, I don't mind losing, $1 million for a bridge that just maybe doesn't necessarily need to be there, but I do object to your cutting Medicare or one of the social programs. So if you bring the people into the process, I think that's probably going to be one of the most beneficial things you can do. It falls in line with the checkbook online, with transparency. When you open up the checkbook, you can see where the money's going, and then you can very easily determine where to cut. One of the things, I think the government's gotten too big. I think we should not just freeze hiring. I think we should begin to scale that back. I know when Governor Patrick took office, I believe he hired 5,000 new people. The problem was he didn't lay off an awful lot of the ones that were already there. And so we keep hiring these $100,000 positions. Marion Walsh was going to get this $175,000 a year job that had been there unfilled for 12 years. He had no problem saying, I'll give you $175,000 a year. That kind of thing has to stop. And the other thing I think is pension reform. Pensions are killing the communities and they're killing the state. I've decided I would not take a pension. I was the first person running for the House or Senate who took a pledge not to take a pension and to serve for only 3 terms. I believe that legislators who shouldn't be a part of the problem, they should be a part of the solution. And I think if we could do actual real pension reform, which we have not done, we could save millions and millions of dollars.
It's interesting that you point out, both of you talk about a little about public participation and stuff, and I like to read about Jacksonian democracy, but I don't know how much it really works in this day and age, because as a state senator, I mean, it comes a point where if we were just to listen to the majority or the will of the people all the time, I mean, there could be chaos out there, and you have to stand up for some have to take some courageous votes and conviction. When as a state senator do you decide that yes, to the will of the people is something I have to abide by, but if there's something that's going to be that might not be in the best interests of the Commonwealth. I mean, this is more of a theoretical question than anything else. I mean, there are going to be some votes where you're going to have to stand up to the people, I would imagine. I mean, how do you view that? Right now, we've got the Tea Party movement; it's getting stronger, and I only point this out because Senator Brown got elected because he said he was going to listen to both sides and make his decision. He goes down to Washington, he does exactly what he's going to do. Conservatives whack him, liberals whack him. He's still in the middle. I think he's done his job. But if you go down there and say the same thing, and then you're going to get it from both sides. I mean, have you detected that at all?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we were talking earlier. We were at a forum earlier in Bedford, and I brought up the fact that the best place to get a sense of how you're doing in politics is to just go to Market Basket, go shopping, because people are very blunt. And I was at Market Basket. This happened the same day. I walked into Market Basket, and one guy came up to me and said, "You need to speak up more on the Board of Selectmen. You're way too quiet, and people are just getting, you're a bump on the log." So I said, "All right, thanks a lot." On the way out, I ran into a woman who said, "You need to learn when to shut up and listen. You talk too much." So I went home and said, I must be doing something right because everybody's mad at me. But yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Sometimes you have to take unpopular votes. I mean, I can't imagine this would happen, but if somehow some crazy ballot initiative got passed, something, I don't know, that would decriminalize some violent crime, something just morally I was opposed to, I would say, too bad, I'm not going along with that. Vote me out. I just have to vote my conscience. I have to, I truly believe that this is not in the best interests of society. It's just mob rule. And I obviously face the political consequences. I did that to an extent with this meat house issue. I mean, like I said, before the vote, I heard from tons of people who said, "We don't want the license, we don't want the license." Afterwards, I heard from a lot of people who took issue with the vote. And that's part of the process. I mean, folks just by nature don't get riled up on things until they hear about it, until after the fact. But I stand by my vote. I mean, criticism is part of the job. So vote your conscience, let the chips fall where they may, and you can sleep soundly at night.
What I've been telling people is there are certain things that are core values for me. I respect the sanctity of life. I believe in lower taxes. I have taken a no new tax pledge. I would never vote for a tax increase. And as long as I sign that pledge every year, I would have to live by that, no matter what the people, if the people said, "No, we want 10% sales tax." I can't believe they ever would, but should they, I would have to vote against that. I would have to, in that case, say, I have to stay with my values, with my conscience. I think in general, though, the people that we're elected by send us down there to represent them, not to do what we think what's best for them. And I think that's the problem we have today. We're living in a nanny state. They want to tell us how much salt we can consume. They want to tell the kids you can't have snacks at school because we're going to tell you you're too overweight. We're going to put you on a weight program. Government has become so intrusive, and the people are so fed up that I think that, yes, we listen to the people on things that we've agreed with the people, that this is what I stand for. But when it comes to stuff like that, if let's say a bunch of liberals came along and said, no, we're going to insist that every child take a vitamin and a calcium pill every morning, and we're going to mandate that by law, even if that came onto a ballot, number one, I don't think it would ever be approved. But something like that, I would say, no, that's intrusive government, that's not the role of government, and that's how I would weigh my decisions on what I support and what I don't support. When you look at the Constitution, what does it say is the role of government? The federal Constitution said it's very limited, things that the people can't do for themselves, you know, military protection, protecting our borders, protecting us as a nation, and building roads and infrastructure. But nowhere does it give it the right to do the things that they're doing today, which is why there's all of this stir with the Tea Party people. They're saying enough is enough. Democrats and Republicans alike. We're taxed enough already. You're mandating health care. I don't believe the government has the right. I don't believe they have the right to dictate to the citizenry. You have to buy a product.
Okay, well, right there. 30 seconds. Is government overreaching?
Yes, absolutely. At the state and federal levels. I mean, look at what the state is doing and look at how big government has gotten. And you can appreciate that. I mean, the examples that Sandy started to enumerate are endless. And at the federal level, of course, it's just totally out of control. When you have a deficit approaching the size of the economy, I mean, clearly something is dramatically wrong with government spending and the role of government in our lives.
I'm departing from the script because this has been very interesting. I think both of you raised some good issues. I want to give this to Eric. You brought up the fact that you would repeal the present universal health care system in Massachusetts. Okay. Do you agree with that? Now you have experience because you left your job from the Health Connector to run for this post, and so you've got an insider's view. What do you think of that statement? Would you repeal and start over, as Sandy has implied, or do you think this is fixable?
I think it's absolutely fixable. I think repeal would have cataclysmic consequences for the people enrolled in these programs and for the cost, the taxpayers. Massachusetts healthcare reform was a pioneering effort, a pioneering bipartisan effort, as folks can remember, because it was fairly recent. Governor Romney, a Republican, running for president, and our legislature, overwhelmingly Democratic, came together to forge this compromise thing. First in the nation, really first in the world attempt to get almost everybody insured. It was never billed as a universal insurance system. I always cringe when I hear that because that suggests that 100% of the people would get covered. But the two big goals of this were, one, to get almost everybody insured, and two, to lower costs. The first one has been unbelievably successful. The first one, I'm not saying the whole effort overall, but getting everybody insured. We're at about 98% insured. That's far better than any other state in the history of the country has ever done. That's better even than what some of the self-professed universal systems of Europe profess. They don't have 100% coverage. So that's unbelievable. I personally was shocked by that. Even as the bottom fell out of the economy, we continue to insure more and more people. So goal one, huge success, no questions asked. Goal two, huge failure. We did not contain costs, neither in the private sector, costs of premium that those of us in the private sector pay, and costs in the public sector for the public programs. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. People are still trying to figure out exactly what's driving this. One of the big reasons is, as I mentioned, the economy tanked. So all of these people who were on private insurance became newly eligible for state-subsidized insurance. The current legislature dropped the ball. They didn't step up and say, wow, this thing is growing way too big, way too quickly. We need to change the eligibility. We need to tweak this program. They just sort of left it on autopilot, said, this is finished, let's talk about gambling and Marion Walsh and Diane Wilkerson and everything else, they dropped the ball. So the program grew and grew and grew, and we find ourselves in the situation we're in now. So if they had stepped up and put the brakes on the growth of these programs, we'd be in fine shape.
Okay, we're going to come back to that. What do you think? Would you stick by the repeal? And what do you feel? Start over? And how would you start over?
Well, we started off with somewhere over 90% of the people in Massachusetts were already covered by health insurance when this plan went in. I believe they only have gone up 3% or 4%. It was pretty high to begin with. And so I don't think it would be catastrophic because a lot of the people that are insured privately will still be insured privately. It will affect some people, that 3% or 4%, and we can find ways to help them. I do not call it a stunning success in any way, shape, or form. I find it intrusive. You have a young man who might be 20 years old, and because the state has mandated he have certain things in his insurance as mandatory coverage, he has to be paying for coverage for birth control pills and for pregnancy. He has to have coverage for everything. Why can't he get a policy that says, I just want catastrophic insurance? If I wreck my car up and I have to be in the hospital for 2 weeks, but that's all I want covered, why can't he have that and have it be a very low premium? I find that the mandates are unsustainable, and I think we're going broke between pensions and the health care. The system is putting the towns, the cities, the people, the businesses, all into a position where they're having to choose. Do I pay for health care? Do I buy food? The seniors are picking, do I pay for health care or do I pay my electric bill? I think it's hurting us more than anybody will even admit.
Eric, follow up on what Sandy said, the cost containment issue. I mean, I think whether it was a bipartisan effort or whatever, I think it was, when you start something, you should answer all the questions. Even if the economy does tank, you should have some safety net to take care of this. And I mean, how can we get back on track with cost containment issues that will basically not cause some of the cataclysmic things that you said that would happen? I mean, I understand that the Obama administration is talking about global payments. We have 4 hospitals in this district, and they're all suffering because of lack of reimbursement compared to Boston hospitals. So it's a fragile economy out there for you in these hospitals. As a state senator, what bill do you file to get this back on track?
Right. Well, first things first, if I may, you talk about how the hospitals, the providers more generally, are in a fragile state now. Imagine if tomorrow we woke up and there were 600,000 newly uninsured Massachusetts residents. That's what would happen if we repealed the healthcare reform bill overnight. Those people aren't just not going to get sick because we repealed the bill. They're still going to get sick, some very much so, and they're going to go to the hospital. And the hospitals under federal law have to treat them. I don't think anybody would call for hospitals to turn people away and let them die in the streets because we've decided to repeal healthcare reform. So let's be realistic. I mean, we still have to treat those people, and somebody's got to foot those bills. You walk into an emergency room and it's $1,000. So if it's not the insurance, if it's not having insurance, who's going to pay those bills if we repeal healthcare reform? It's going to be the state, which is the rest of us.
Well, wasn't everybody originally supposed to pay something?
Well, that's what I'm...
And then we got away from that.
That's what I want to say. If you want to put healthcare reform back on track, I think 3 big things. First, increase cost sharing for people on the subsidized programs. The low-income folks who are on Commonwealth Care, the state subsidized program, they're paying essentially the same amount out of their own pockets that they were in 2006, even as costs have increased dramatically for everybody else, even as the economy's tanked. They should be paying more. I mean, a central premise of this reform effort was personal responsibility. Let's give them the opportunity to exercise personal responsibility, frankly, like the rest of us do. They'll get something out of it, and it'll help the rest of us foot the bill. Let's downgrade minimum creditable coverage. Everybody in Massachusetts has to have insurance, but the bar is set way too high in terms of the set of benefits you have to have in order to be considered insured. It should be set much, much lower. I myself can't imagine going without a prescription drug benefit, but if some people want to make that choice, that's the nature of insurance. You take that risk. You should be able to buy a policy without drugs.
Okay. I know you want to go on,
okay.
You can go on, but Sandy,
But
what do you
basically,
think?
he's just saying some of the same things that I've been saying all along. Part of the problem is with this mandated health insurance, people are not given those options. We talked about the 20-year-old who is carrying, you know, birth control pills on his policy or some other things that he'll never have need of. We need to, if we're going to not repeal the insurance, the health care, then we need to give them options so that they can get down. I talked to a guy the other day, he said, I was paying $300 a month for insurance before. He said, I'm now paying $1,800 a month to insure myself and my family. That's crazy. I mean, if you're a low-income person, that could be something that's totally unsustainable for you, and even for middle-class people. $1,800 a month is a big chunk to be paying. I think that if somebody wants to be able to purchase their health care insurance across the state lines, they should be allowed to. We've done that in other areas. People are going to New Hampshire for liquor. But no, as far as even auto insurance, you can buy insurance out of state.
Well, but is it, and this question's to you, isn't this the failure of the legislature? I mean, they just passed their 50th mandate, and while it's a good thing to add autism to the healthcare system, there are now 50 mandates, and yet there's no way to pay for this mandate. So it used to be that you used to identify a revenue stream to pay for these things. Now, they're just putting, businesses are going to have to pay $750 a year more than what they paid for this one item, which we all agree, yeah, maybe it should be on there, but they just keep passing these things and adding mandates, 50 mandates now. I mean, is that a failure of the legislature?
Absolutely, and I've been saying since I've been running that unfunded mandates is something that I would work against. I would not pass a bill that is going to affect the local community unless we figured out before we passed the bill how it's going to be paid for. The communities cannot sustain some of these unfunded mandates. The special needs and the special ed mandates that they have, while they're well-intentioned, by virtue of the fact that they're so expensive. Some communities, they were telling me the other day, a parent was paying $40,000, the town was paying $40,000 a year to take care of their one child. And while that's commendable, the cities and towns just cannot pay that any longer. We've got to find a better way to deal with these mandates that are crippling the towns.
Legislature.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about health mandates here.
Yeah.
I mean, health mandates predated the healthcare reform law.
But the overall spending, let's just tweak this question a little. The overall spending in the legislature seems like, you know, there used to be a way to pay as you go. Okay, now it doesn't seem like the money's going to be there. It's a bottomless pit. I mean,
yeah,
would you ever vote for anything without a revenue stream?
No, I mean, it's totally out of control. I mean, yeah, that absolutely I would not. And the other thing they do that drives me crazy is they attach essentially pieces of legislation to budgets. So the budget is, you know, a set of line items, all the things we're going to spend money on this year, which is perfectly appropriate. That's the point of a budget. But then there's a big PS, the so-called outside sections, where they essentially tack on pieces of legislation that have no costs tied to them. I mean, they have costs, but they're not called out in the legislation. I mean, I don't think that those should be a part of the budget to begin with, but as independent pieces of legislation, they should have a cost study attached to them. We should know how much things are going to cost before we pass them. That is why I said I haven't made up my mind on the sales tax ballot question, because there is no study attached to it as to where we're going to pay for this thing. I think we need to have a plan for everything we do. Voting for things because they sound cool is how we get into the problems we're in. That $20 billion hole in the middle of downtown Boston. That sounded really cool at the time. $20 billion later, they have no clue how they're going to pay for it. So yeah, we need a plan. We need to run the state like you run your household. You don't just spend money because it's fun. You spend money because you have to, and you figure out where you're going to get it.
Let's move to education. There's been a big issue in Chelmsford and some of these other communities where the formula levels they claim skewed, and they've just not funded education up to the amount that they need to sustain the schools. Do you think that's a fair statement, Sandy? Do you think there's anything that you could do as a state senator to refine that, or are the schools getting enough money?
It's interesting, in our district, I met with a gentleman who is doing an awful lot of work with Chapter 70, and he said we left in 2009, or maybe it was 2010, whatever the last budget was. He said we left $6 million on the table had we been getting the full, I believe it's 17%. Chelmsford, unfortunately, was getting it 17%, but it's still underfunded because of the way that the formula is crafted. What I'm doing is working with him and with other people who can actually figure out how to fix the formula, and how do we then make sure that Chelmsford is receiving as good a shake as, say, Westford is, because Westford is receiving a lot more funds than Chelmsford is, and they're about the same size community. I think that Chelmsford, and I think it was Waltham, also lost a lot of money. I think Waltham, about $1.5 million was left on the table because they weren't funding it even according to the formula, and that's another problem. That's a big problem.
Fair. Any thoughts on education funding?
Yeah, I mean, the dirty little secret to this formula the state uses to dole out Chapter 70 funding is that there is no formula. It's a mess. We had the guy who ostensibly administers the formula come to Chelmsford. Representative Corey Atkins brought him out to brief local officials on this, and even he at one point conceded that he doesn't understand the formula. It's all politics. I mean, let's be frank. Chelmsford has been carved up in the House, so we don't have a single voice representing our interests in the House of Representatives, and we're paying consequences when it comes to doling out Chapter 70 funding. I think if we're going to fix the funding, we have to first fix the configuration of the districts, and that's why I would support the appointment of an independent redistricting commission. This was voted upon last year. It lost largely along partisan lines. Representative Jim Arciero, one of Chelmsford's 4 reps, to his great credit, a Democrat, voted with the Republicans to support this. Most of the Democrats, of course, just fall in line and vote against it, because God forbid they have an unbiased body decide how the line should be drawn. If the lines are redrawn and Chelmsford gets, God, 1 or 2 state reps, we'd have a much clearer voice, and we'd be able to be heard in the process much more clearly than we are now.
Yes or no? Just yes or no question. Do you favor lifting the cap on public charter schools in the state?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Good. Okay, now lately we've had a big controversy over the Massachusetts diminishing the role of MCAS and joining the Common Core standards. It was set up by the Obama administration. The race to the top funding to win $250 million of funding. New York, by the way, got $700 million, even though their application was 10 points lower than ours. But we finished number 1, but we only got $250 million out of it. You happy with this effort to change accountability measures in the state on education? Do you think these, what you've read about Common Core standards, do you think that we'll be able to maintain high levels of achievement in Massachusetts, which was the model for the country? But what are your thoughts?
It's funny because when MCAS was first being proposed back in 1993, I was concerned. I had concern about having a set of standards for the entire state. I didn't think it would work. And much to my delight, it actually did work. And I became an advocate and a supporter of the MCAS system. I wouldn't let my kids take it when they were younger. And by the time my kids were in high school, they all did fine on it. They did very, very well. I also was studying at the same time the Common Core that was being proposed. They've been working on this for years, trying to get it in. And I have bigger concerns about that. I don't think, number one, it's not the role of federal government to be dictating to the states what they should be teaching in their schools. I still say it's up to the local school committees and the principals and the teachers to be determining what goes on in their own towns and cities. The MCAS has worked because they've been working very hard, I think, to work with the teachers and with the towns and with the cities, and they've been trying to maintain a really high level of questioning. People are objecting to MCAS. They say they spend all their time teaching to the test. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think that when you are teaching to the test, you're still learning. And these kids are learning answers, and they're learning how to think, and they're learning how to do math, and they're learning how to answer history questions. So all in all, that could be part of the reason that we've been so successful in Massachusetts, is the kids are being made to study and being made to be able to pass the simple tests that are required.
Right there. Eric, your response?
Yeah, I oppose ceding a huge lead in educational achievement to the federal government. I mean, when I go out and talk to business owners, they're very clear. One of the few things, one of the few positives we have going for us here in Massachusetts, we have an unbelievably well-educated workforce, and we're all about academics in Massachusetts. That's what we excel at. We have phenomenal colleges, phenomenal high schools. We have mini economies getting set up around these schools. Why in the world would we cede a huge lead in that one thing to some clowns in Washington? It's like, why don't we just invite all the businesses in the state to leave? That's the one thing keeping them here. They say, cost of living is a joke, taxes are a joke, the regulatory climate's a joke. The one thing keeping me here is the fact that you focus so seriously on education. So to give that up is giving away the whole thing, giving away the store. So no, we shouldn't go into that. It's insane. And for people to say, well, it's worth money. I mean, there's some things that are more important than a one-term federal payout that's going to come with countless strings attached. I mean, the federal government has done this for decades with health programs. If you do this with your Medicaid program, we'll give you a couple of $100 million. Then you turn around and it ended up costing us more than what they were reimbursing us anyway. So no, it's ridiculous.
15 seconds.
And what do you want?
Okay, anything to add to that? You made your point, he made his point.
No, I agree. I really believe that the federal government, it's not its role. I think the states can do a much better job, and I think it would be a disaster in the making. And unfortunately, Governor Patrick doesn't see it our way.
That's interesting. Okay, moving on, we're inside 10 minutes, and I'll leave you people with a closing statement. But casino gambling was such a contentious issue, and it looked like the legislature had a deal. They waited right till the end to decide to do a most important piece of legislation. We all know how that ended in failure. Are you in favor of casino gambling, Eric? And what would have you done as a state senator to get that thing across the goal line?
I'm opposed to casino gambling, so I'm glad it failed. The process by which it failed was, as usual, a travesty. It just sort of fell apart at the last minute. There was no organization to it whatsoever. But I'm pleased with the end result. Casino gambling is not going to solve our problems in Massachusetts. It won't bring in significantly new revenues. Any new revenues it does bring in will come at the cost of our lottery program, which is one of the most successful in the country. We'd be fishing out of the same pond of people. It would not create good, well-paying, long-lasting jobs. I mean, like I was saying when we asked about education, we have one of the most highly skilled workforces in the world. These are not folks who are going to settle for jobs at casinos. Nothing against those types of jobs, but our economy, that doesn't mesh with our economy. Third, if we did go down this road, we would do it Massachusetts style. If you read the legislation that was filed and deliberated upon, it would set up 4 new state agencies to oversee this expanded gaming industry. That would further eat into any net new revenues that were achieved. Finally, and I'm not trying to be a snob here or anything, casinos are inconsistent with our heritage, values, and culture as a state. We don't want to go down that road. They bring all kinds of bad stuff to the areas you put them up in. I don't want them in my district.
I think you made your point clear. Sandy, where do you stand?
I think this is one, we agree on a lot of things, and casinos are a big part of that. When Governor Patrick first proposed casinos several years ago, I joined a group with some people that I was working with. It was called Casino Free Mass. And they had done studies that basically Eric is talking about, where when casinos come into town, you end up with a much higher crime rate around them. The other thing is it would devastate the local businesses in those communities, because people will stop going out to eat at the little restaurant around the corner and they'll go to the big casino. It'll hurt the local shops because they have little shops in there. And as Eric stated, the money that comes in doesn't stay in Massachusetts. a lot of the owners of these things, I was just talking to somebody the other day, and he said, did you realize that they're Indonesians that are running a lot of these? I said, no, I did not. I thought they were all Florida crime bosses or something. And because I knew the money does not stay in Massachusetts. The profit leaves the state, and I think that would cause us even more problems. I know there are a lot of people that are rooting for them. They say, well, I go down to Foxwoods, and I have a great time. And I would much prefer to gamble in Massachusetts. I disagree. I think, as a matter of fact, Casino Free Mass did a study, and they drew a circumference around each of the proposed casinos, and they overlapped. The circle that they drew was to show the area of influence of a casino in the area. Massachusetts would be totally covered by 3 casinos at those 3 strategic locations. The whole state would be impacted by it.
Good. Okay. We've reached that point where we're going to do the closing statements. I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes to look right into the camera and tell the voters on September 14th why they should vote for you. So this is the point where you make your case. Okay? Eric, why don't you go first?
Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Jim and the Lowell Sun for hosting this. Great exchange of ideas. Thanks to Sandy for joining me at the table here. I'm Eric Dahlberg, Republican candidate for State Senate here in the 3rd Middlesex District. You've heard some specifics on my priorities if elected to the State Senate. Lower taxes, streamlined government, a better business climate, elected officials who work for the taxpayers, not for the special interests, not for themselves, and finally, responsive representation. If you share those priorities, I ask you to get involved in my campaign. We've got 5 days to go until the Republican primary on Tuesday the 14th. Visit my website, dahlbergforsenate.com, or call me personally. My cell is 617-461-2737. Get involved, let's win on Tuesday, and then let's win again November the 2nd in the general.
Thank you. Very good. Very economical. Sandy?
Hi, I'm Sandi Martinez from Chelmsford. I am also a candidate for the Republican State Senate position in the 3rd Middlesex District. You've heard me answer a lot of questions about a lot of things. It's not really about me, though. It's really about you, the people. I will be elected by you, and my plan is to go down there to serve you, to be your voice at the State House, your voice that hasn't been heard for a long time. We talk about public policy, we talk about votes, and those are all a very big part of what we do. But without your voice, I cannot be effective. I need to hear from you. I need to understand your thoughts, your concerns. I've talked to thousands of you in businesses and in homes across the district, and I'm asking each and every one of you if you want someone who is not beholden to anyone, who has not worked in the public sector, who has always worked in the private sector, and has the best interest of we the people at heart. I'm asking for your vote on September 14th. My website is www.sandyforstatesenate.com, and I give my cell phone to people across the district, even on robocalls, so I'm going to give it to you as well, 978-758-3830. We have a headquarters here in Chelmsford, or in Chelmsford, not here, at 93 Chelmsford Street. Stop by, sign up for the campaign. Like Eric said, we're down to the last 5 days, and I need your help. Get involved and support me on November 14th. Thank you.
No matter who wins this election, would you support the other candidate against Susan Fargo?
Yes.
Yes, I'll support him.
Well, this concludes our debate. I think we touched on some good issues, and the candidates made some distinctions. And I hope that you would go out and recognize their efforts, no matter who you vote for on Tuesday, September 14th. You go out there and participate. Thank you very much for watching this program. Have a good day.